It is now 7 o'clock. I call this meeting of the General Government and Public Safety Committee to order. Rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to open the floor for comments from citizens. Any comments?
Just wondering if y'all might be able to give me an answer on.
If you can state your name and address.
My name is Jason Scott. I live at 121 North Allen. I came to the last meeting and asked about the peace disturbance that chance occurred on the 15th and 16th of last month.
Okay. I wasn't in attendance, everyone, so what was your question specifically?
The fire alarm went off on the 15th and 16th for 12 hours. There was no response from the law. I repeatedly asked why and why and why, and was then told to leave the police department where I was going to jail. And I repeated my question again and again, and I went to jail for it. Nobody would answer me. Chance is chance. They ain't gonna give them a peace disturbance. They disturbed my peace. I was awake for that whole alarm.
I did talk to the fire chief about the alarm, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that because it was a holiday, and that system is a dry system, meaning the pipes don't have water in them until it's called for. It's held dry by an air compressor. The air compressor went bad, which allowed the pipes to fill, which set the alarm off. Because it was a holiday and the fire system maintenance people were unavailable, that there was no way to silence the alarm. That's my understanding. Am I close?
Correct. That's an understanding for why the alarm went off. Why wasn't there any action taken about it?
Because it was a holiday and the alarm maintenance people were unavailable.
I inquired and asked and asked and asked for over a week and a half after this why they wouldn't issue a peace disturbance. I'm a citizen of Centralia. I live less than 60 yards away from that alarm that went off, and my peace was disturbed for over 12 hours.
Well, I mean, I don't want to argue the point with you, but to me, a neighborly attitude would go a long ways in this.
It does. I live 60 yards from it. I listen to Chance. And prior to living there, I lived about a block and a half from there for the last 15 years. Chance bumps and thumps. Their machines do what they do. They're entitled to that now. As of from what I understood listening to what answers I did get from Centralia, was that they're not going to issue Chance a peace disturbance for nothing. Nothing. Not a thing. And there's no way that they would.
It is zoned industrial, which really kind of gives them free reign as far as
If a fire alarm went off 60 yards from your door, sir, would you do something about it? Would you be asking a question?
Probably not.
I'm sorry, but if a fire alarm went off on your front porch for 12 hours, you'd be asking somebody to do something about it. If I stood across the street from your house with a big bell and rang it for 12 hours, would I be under the subject of peace disturbance, even if I lived in an industrial area? If you lived across the street from Chance, sir, and I stood there with a big cowbell and rang it for 12 hours, you'd have something done about that.
Is that a fire alarm?
No, it's not.
Well, I feel like you're just wanting to be argumentative at this point.
I am, because nothing's been done about it.
Well, it's just, I thought you wanted an explanation.
I wanted an answer to why Chance was not issued a peace disturbance.
Well, because it
That's all I
wasn't,
wanted.
I mean, why do you want to issue them a peace disturbance? It was a fire alarm. They did what they could do.
Nobody did anything.
Joe,
Yeah, the fire department
I stood on Allen Street and nobody came to Chance's doors.
hold on a second. Joe.
Well, I'm sure
go
the
ahead.
fire department was there.
Well, for the purposes of issuing a citation or arresting anybody for any crime, there are certain criteria that have to be met for the crime. State law and federal law requires a certain mental culpability, that's what they call it. For the crime of peace disturbance, a person must act knowingly in a manner. Knowingly is defined by law as consciously and willfully. There was no person that resulted in the fire alarm, and there was no conscious nor willful resulted in the fire alarm going off. By state law, by city ordinance, it is not a violation. For someone to stand out for 12 hours and ring a bell, that would be a conscious and willful act. Somebody did that on purpose.
Chance had security that drove in between them two buildings
Yes.
4 times in that 12 hours.
Yes,
They
sir.
didn't do nothing about it.
They more than once attempted to shut the alarm off, more than once.
I beg to differ because I sat on Allen Street for over 4 hours of that 12 hours alarm.
Regardless, the alarm does not fall under state statute, nor does the alarm fall under city ordinance. There is no crime,
No crime.
It has to be a conscious or willful act.
period.
Okay, it was not a conscious or willful act. No one intentionally set the alarm off. Okay?
For it to be illegal, somebody would have to intentionally set the alarm off and intentionally allow it to continue.
It was allowed to continue because nobody
I
shut
said
it off.
intentionally.
12 hours, the fire alarm went off.
I-
Believe me, it wasn't,
It doesn't fit the statute.
nobody tried to turn off a fire alarm for 12 hours.
I think he's giving you a technical reason.
Yeah, that's what they gave me in front of the police
Right?
station.
And it stands true. Now, I do have a couple questions about the alarm.
Go ahead.
The alarm was attempted to be shut off.
Right.
I contacted somebody at Chance who forwarded me an email from the security. The way I read that was that they actually did disengage the alarm.
They did eventually remove the power supply from it on the 16th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
I will agree with you. It didn't go off for long.
Why
They
couldn't
didn't
that
know what
have
to
been
do
done
with it.
12 hours ago?
They didn't know what to do with it.
So it did go
There's
on.
their negligence right there. That's their negligence, is not knowing how.
Negligence is not, has nothing to do with peace disturbance.
It doesn't meet the threshold.
They
Negligence.
didn't have their security
Mr. Scott.
doing what they were doing.
I spoke of culpable mental states. Negligence is one of those culpable mental states. That is far below knowingly. It has to occur knowingly in order for there to be any violation of the statute or ordinance. This did not occur, period. You cannot cite somebody if it does not fit the legal definition of the offense. There is no statutory basis to do so.
So basically what you're saying is, a fire alarm disturbed my peace, and y'all ain't gonna do nothing about it.
No, what I'm saying is a fire alarm may have disturbed your peace and there is nothing I can do about it. Under the letter of the law, I have no options with.
That makes no sense under the letter of the law in Centralia's municipal court and y'all's municipal area.
I'm not sure, it's
That
just,
makes sense.
I don't think you can pin that straight to
No.
Centralia. He's
Centralia
talking
City
about a
ordinance.
state
The
statute.
Centralia
Y'all
ordinance
have your own
is a
program.
mirror image
You have
of
your
the
own
state
ordinances.
ordinance, or the state statute.
We can't do anything more than what state statute allows us to do.
It's a mirror image of the state statute. The state of Missouri determined what the criteria is for peace disturbance.
I would also express that if this was an ongoing chronic behavior from Chance,
Absolutely.
the
12 hours is ongoing enough, sir. Believe me, I didn't get a wink of sleep. I have a
But the-
50-inch TV screen in my living room that goes to 120 volume, and I cranked that sucker all the way up, and I could still hear a fire alarm.
But that was one specific incident, though. As opposed to, it happened one weekend and then a week later it happened again.
if it was repeated like that, I would say that we would more than happily be trying to.
Under state statute, you're telling me that you couldn't, even
No.
if it occurred again.
We could not give him a summons or
Yes.
a violation under the statute, under what we could, as a council, go and address them and ask them about working out something that was agreeable to both parties.
Maybe Chance having their security do their job, because if all it took was turning the power off, you can't tell me somebody
It
was
wasn't
not
just
involved
turning the
here.
power off, it was
I-
actually.
The
unhooking
words
the
out of your
power
mouth was
supply from
turning
it.
the power off.
It
The
was
security
Disconnected
don't
action.
turn it off anyway. It's not.
See, that's what I was told too, so I didn't know why.
It's done by the maintenance people.
And I understand the maintenance people were called in, they weren't on duty necessarily, but they were called in to try to work on
The
it.
following morning.
No.
Not the way I read that email.
The alarm initiated at 8:26 p.m. on the 15th.
That sounds exactly
Okay.
right.
Fire department was called, and everybody else was called. They went.
To where?
They-
Allen Street building?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
documented.
Okay.
So now,
You don't think we went down the street?
I've never seen a fire truck, I've never heard anything, and I live in the alley, looking right at the building.
Let me do here. 9 PM, the security officer contacted maintenance employee Jeff Colley, who was on call, okay? He came, realized that, hey, I can't do this, he called the maintenance supervisor. So from 8:26 to 10:55, they finally got the alarm silenced, but the bell would continue to go off, okay? They had attempted it by contacting the alarm company couldn't do anything with it. And I agree with you, yes, the alarm bell did go off for a long time, and it did get shut off 9 AM. The only way it got shut off was they disconnected the power supply from that bell, okay? Now, that is an extreme measure, because the fact is, by requirements, they're supposed to have an active and working alarm system in that building. Okay?
If they owned the wire to that
Okay.
alarm, every one of the other ones would have went off.
So, like I said, they did whatever they could.
At 9 PM, you said that maintenance was called,
Yes,
right?
I did.
Okay, at 9 PM, that sucker's been going off for 11 or 12 hours right then.
No, we're talking on the 15th, on Saturday
Oh,
the
in the
15th.
evening, okay, I apologize, not PM, AM. So,
So, what I'm trying to say is, the fact is, they did the normal thing that would normally work for it, but this was an abnormal situation. So, like I said, it's a one-time thing, it hasn't happened since,
it hasn't happened in 15 years.
okay?
In 15 years, it hasn't happened.
Okay.
Why
So,
was,
I'm not sure what your question is as far as, your initial question was why was Chance not given a peace disturbance citation?
and I asked the
We
city to
have,
give
we
me
have
that in
answered that
writing.
question,
I asked the city to give me that in writing,
okay?
and I asked for an answer.
We have it.
There you go.
Is that right?
There's your answer.
Any other comments from citizens? One, I have my copy, not notarized. The city hall has not been for a copy notarized. A written complaint against an officer in this town that arrested me for asking the question continuously. Has anybody else got a copy of that? Nobody ever been given a copy of that? I filed it on, well, it's not on my copy. I don't have the notary date. It was done, I believe, 2 city council meetings ago.
2 city council meetings ago, I'm sorry.
Last city council, I was here to address the peace disturbance, and 2 meetings ago, it was that afternoon. I filed for it, I made it into the emergency room that evening, so I didn't make it to the council meeting for
Okay.
asking questions about it.
I believe the mayor would have gotten a copy.
Generally speaking, the mayor is kind of over the police department issues
Yes.
and not necessarily the council. So that'd be an issue that would be taken up directly by the mayor.
Where's the mayor?
He's not attending, all I know is that he's not attending tonight. I'm sure he'll be at the next meeting because he has to.
I won't be present. I'm about to do a couple months in the county jail for this said charge that this said officer gave me
Okay,
as of tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
okay.
So, because this officer, Harris, wrote me a charge a year ago, almost 13 months to date, and he wrote 14 pages of statements, or his account, 14 pages. The prosecuting attorney in Boone County offered me the maximum sentence for peace disturbance, 6 months in the county jail. Took me 11 months in court without an attorney to get that down to 60 days, or drop is what I was going for. I finally gave up with that, took 60 days in suspended sentence and 2 years unsupervised probation. Said officer that wrote the same charge that I went for court for a year on, just wrote me a trespassing the police department and did not do his job to the fullest. Like, understanding, like, if you'd have read this, you know that that cop didn't do his job. I've been arrested here several times. He didn't do anything within guidelines,
Okay.
anything. And I'm going to jail now for the charge that he gave me a year and a half ago, or 13 months ago, for something that he just decided, because all I did was ask a question. And as either one of these officers might be able to tell you, both those officers stated that I was very inebriated.
Also video, it was right there, correct?
Why wasn't I charged with drunk in public and not trespassing?
We don't have an ordinance against drunken public.
Oh, but we're under the guidelines of the state. There is a drunk in public.
There's never been an
Columbia-
ordinance adopted by the city of
As a
Centralia.
Columbia ordinance.
No, that's by the state. I've been charged with it. City of Columbia doesn't have that as their own
Well,
ordinance.
we don't, and we don't utilize it.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not too sure what you're asking about the council.
I'm asking if we can address this, and you're saying the mayor's not here, so we're not going to, right? I'll be back in 65 days. Any nearer to the date, I can't give you with your meetings. But in 65 days, I'll be here to check and see when the next city council meeting is.
Okay.
And I would like this addressed that day when I come back to your next city council meeting. So in 2 months, please have this in the mayor's hands and here, because I'll be back again after doing charge time for this said charge.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much
sir.
for not doing nothing.
All right, well,
All right,
65 days.
Yeah, I understand why.
Any other, any,
Okay,
yes, any other comments from citizens? And I see none. Moving on to public safety, city prosecutor.
Very first, sir.
All right, fire department activity report in your packet. Any questions? Would you, I would like to ask, would you quit driving such camouflage vehicles? So that people will be able to identify you.
Maybe you should have blown the horn when you went by his house. Wait, that fire detector was going off.
Just
You
for the
couldn't
record,
hear.
did the police department receive a complaint from any other citizen?
No, sir. None.
I did go over to the police department and I inquired how annoying you had to be in order to be arrested, over there, and I think the answer was pretty annoying.
I inquired it.
I
Chance got me
understand.
over the deal,
I understand there's a video of it, if you're interested, the video will explain.
and I also spoke with a citizen that lives a block off of Railroad Street around Allen. Said he was outside and heard the alarm, but went inside his apartment and could no longer hear it. So,
I never heard it.
I never
I was
heard
in
it.
town all week, never heard it.
We were in town all weekend and I didn't hear it.
So, I'm not sure that we can,
Well, let's go set it off and go see if we can hear it.
Go set it off and see if we can hear it up here.
Statement, it's just another incident where somebody's trying to justify poor behavior by highlighting other poor behavior.
Well, but it's not like it deflects though, it doesn't mitigate something else.
I know, but it
That's
doesn't
what
stop
some
them
of
from
us
doing
are.
it.
All right, so, activity report, fire department, any questions? Any other of the fire department?
The only thing really, anything major, is the transmission. They're telling me the transmission in the 86 Ford, which would be 1102. Donnie, who's watching the truck, thinks there's some issue with it.
Is that our oldest truck?
No, we got one older than that.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the one, what would be the second, you know, we got the red one, as 1101, and we moved this one to 1102. But I mean, it's still, I mean, what they consider maybe something, I don't know, we have to, it's running and everything. Seems
There's
fine.
the potential of a problem.
That's pretty well what.
Okay.
Okay, but that would fall under maintenance, which is under a maintenance budget, right?
The fire department vehicles are not part of equipment use because they're used so seldom, you can't really figure out what a per mile or per hour charge is. They pay directly, there is money budgeted in their department for repairs. I hope it's cheap.
We're just gonna keep watching it for a little bit and see what it's gonna, right now, I mean,
Understood.
Nothing we should get checked out for, I mean, in case it's something easy to fix now
well,
and instead of tearing
it's
something
still
up, it
same.
costs more money.
Go to St. Louis to get fixed.
Nobody around this area
They
can,
said, what's that place in Mexico?
Fire truck,
Huh?
fire truck?
No, there's
oh, mid-mo trailer or whatever.
no, it's a transmission shop. No, that's the guy told me, it's another, Tony Bryson worked there for a little while, went back off.
Well, whatever. There's a company.
They look at them, but they said they would have to send it off to, it's an Allison transmission, is what it is. I think we just need to wait a little bit and kind of keep watching.
items for the fire department? All right, moving on to police department, activity reports in your packet. Any questions? Updated traffic regulation ordinances, stop and yield signs. Any questions on that?
You wanna,
Are there changes to it than what's already there?
minor changes. This takes a master ordinance from about 20 years ago. It's been amended 7 or 8 times with additions. In this case, it adds 2 more. One at the cul-de-sac in Cobblestone Lake where it intersects with Hampton. The other is one that technically isn't platted yet. It's Kelly Court. All the utilities are in. And it will intersect with Country Line Drive after P&Z and you folks final out that approval. I just took it myself to add it to the list. It does delete one because we no longer have an intersection at Sims Street and Columbia. We closed that railroad crossing. I believe those are the only changes. For reasons of consistency, I shuffled a couple of things down so we didn't have any vacant numbers. But that's through today and actually through about a month from now at the official list. With regard to the yield signs, technically until a few years ago, we had no yield signs. But then the intersections we have up at 124 and 22 and Howard Burton at 22, they put in right turn lanes to emerging traffic, and all of those got added yield signs, so I put them back in. We hadn't had yield signs in this town for more than a decade, but they were added back in.
Anything else on stop and yield? Parking zone designations.
Same sort of a case. This was an original ordinance that they covered types of parking zones, no parking, diagonal parking, that sort of thing, restricted to bus parking, no parking during certain times. Almost any sort of parking that has a geographic location, with the exception of designated handicap spaces and with the designation of truck parking zones. Those are specifically in the city code. Everything else just in the code says, they'll be set by ordinance, but they don't have to be in the city code. So back to the original lists in each of those categories, updated, probably fewer updates than the list of stop signs, but still updated so that going forward, somebody can quickly find what the current list is instead of searching through 8 or 9 or 10 different ordinances to see if it was added, subtracted.
Makes it more manageable. Moving on, the subscription to Leads Online.
Which is me.
Yes.
Okay. Leads Online. For those of you who don't know, the city of Centralia has thieves. Leads Online is a computer program out there that will allow the police department to search local pawn shops, scrap yards, that kind of thing, for things that have been pawned. Recently, it solved about $1,600. We got $1,600 worth of stuff back for our citizens in Centralia. Just recently, and put a couple of bad guys in jail for hopefully long periods of time. Subscription rate's $1,488 a year. We previously have had it. During some of the lean years, it was one of those things that we could cut, so we did. But due to the fact that we've gotten so many cases that have been happening, we've elected to attempt to leave and say, hey, can we have it back? Because pawn shops are mandated by state law to report all items that are pawned. They are, you can go on this thing, you can find out who, what, when, where, you can put the serial numbers for items, you can, it'll just blow your mind if you play with it. Like I said, subscription rate is $1,488, that's what we're asking for. Like I said, it is a renewal. I think the agreement is a 3-year agreement, I believe if I read it correctly, is that right, Lynn? Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, like I said, police department proposed to you all, if you would do it for me, that $1,488 be designated for a Leads Online subscription. Thanks.
One
Any
thing,
question?
I find this very interesting, and the pawn shops are really good about putting.
They have to. They're mandated by law, and they do.
They do. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So in theory, we could subscribe to this, and we could have maybe an educational campaign for the citizenry that if they have
Now,
items with numbers on them, to maybe make a list of them.
there is actually, Leads Online does offer a program where citizens can go in, make a Leads Online account. I think it's actually free, so I'd have to look at that for sure. List their things, your, 70-inch big screen TV, serial number and everything else. If it's pawned, the agency where that occurred at actually gets a hit and says, hey, by the way, this 70-inch big screen TV that these people, wasn't the owner that did it. So there are things for the citizens to do, and it could be an educational campaign, yes, very easily. And like I said, I believe that comes with the subscription, that option. So,
I think that's interesting because
like
a
I
lot of
said,
that's
we've
trending up.
we've made use of it, we've recovered the items, they're back in the citizens, and the bad guys are good. Just that simple. And it paid for it in 2 cases.
More than that, we had 2 cases of a pawn shop involved, but in the act of conducting the interview on those 2 cases, recovering those items.
That's right.
I also saw 3 or 4 other cases, including the air conditioning case from the fire department, as well as several others. They were all connected to the same person who'd been in and out of this pawn shop. We actually closed like 5 or 6 cases.
Some of them not being ours, some of them being out of the county too, so.
my understanding is the department could set up alerts that Leads Online would send you a certain activity occurred as well, correct?
That's true. So,
Is this limited to Missouri pawn shops or?
what I gave you, the $1,488 is Missouri. For additional prices, you can have national. It's like $2,500.
If we're in the Kansas City or St. Louis area, it would be.
Right,
valuable, but-
Central Missouri area, normally you bad guys aren't gonna go very far. So. They won't be making any money. They'd be burning it all in gas.
Took a look at their miscellaneous expenses and training expenses, that sort of thing. And what Ronald's been coming in, and I don't really see where agreeing to this would be a problem, recognizing that this is an ongoing yearly expense that you're locking into. Certainly this year, we should have no problem with it.
Well, I made a comment to Larry about, looking back through the types of activity that you guys have had in the past year. This genre of information, he said, it's happening more and more where this kind of information is germane to the case.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And he said it wasn't that way 5 years ago. He said, but it definitely coming out now.
Five years ago, you would get on the phone with every pawn shop in town, lots of time. This way you type it in what you're looking for, or if you have a suspect, you type in the suspect's name, you see exactly what it was what, if he's had any activity last 30, 60, 90 days, a year. So.
And my understanding is we would like activity, movement on this by the board today?
No,
No? Okay.
it's a contract, takes an ordinance.
Okay.
It'll be on the agenda for next month.
Okay. Any other comments about it from the board?
James does.
Oh, James, yeah.
Lieutenant Bias, how far back do these records that you get access to the suspicion go? Say, for example, the Centralia jewelry theft or something from 5 years ago.
I think you're gonna get scheduled, because the fact is, in 5 years ago, they weren't mandated. Take it back, let me rephrase that.
When did
They were
the mandate
mandated,
start?
but they may not have been doing it. Okay, it's come about so far now that the pawn shops are looking at it as, it helps them too, in the long run. You know, they're not buying stolen stuff. I mean, they're, I know it was around 5 years ago, but I don't know how reliable it was 5 years ago. Maybe I should say that.
So, when did the legal action take place that required the mandated that they start reporting?
I don't know that answer. I don't know what it was.
So you're looking at it more ongoing as opposed to
Ongoing
looking
reason.
backwards as
Right,
opposed to
correct.
things that were
Yeah.
stolen you haven't found yet?
Correct. And the fact is, your evidence is gone, most likely, like jewelry. Pawn shops take it in, melted in 30 days or less.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board on that subject? Okay. Moving on to emergency management.
I have noticed, if Danny didn't get it, that there's still slots available on the hazmat IQ training.
Already got that?
You have it?
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, nothing, sir.
Right, protective inspection.
We are now up to 15 new housing units for the year. And I have been pursuing some more dangerous structure notices. In particular, I believe it is 425 South Allen. I have to double check the address, but it's the house farthest to the south of the two junkers on the west side of the street. It's been vacant for about 4 or 5 years. The bank recently sold it to a gentleman in Hallsville, and he has been discussing who could possibly tear it down. So I think we'll see progress on that one fairly soon.
Good.
I think that's about all I have to report.
Moving on to general government and finance, economic development, the credit report. That report is in your packet. Any questions on the report? Park board. Jennifer, the meeting is in the packet. I'm sorry, that's it. Any questions? Moving on to cemetery board.
Nothing to report, sir.
Okay. Tree board?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Library board. Active.
Information went back.
July financial statements, any questions?
How's the audit progressing? How's the audit progressing?
Scheduled to be reported on later on this meeting. The audit is done. I do not have a final copy yet. Heidi Chick, representing Williams Keeper, who will be here next Monday to present it to you. She has a PowerPoint presentation and should be the usual audit. Sail through, no problems.
That should be it.
Yeah, well, it's just reading the draft of all, everything, I will assure you that I know of no reason why there won't be smooth sailing.
Bills over $1,250. Any questions? Moving on. Other general government, setting property tax rates.
Move the copy, just a second.
Okay, sorry.
Just chicken scratching, it's not shorthand. Okay, tax rates. I have received the assessed valuations. I have plugged them into the online state calculator. There is a small concern in that I don't get ever, until the state does their calculations, it's the divvy up between what part of the state assessed valuation is real estate and what is personal property. That has a very small effect on what the maximum tax rates can be. And so I used last year's numbers, and I'm not quite sure if that follows through correctly. But in any case, I put an ad in the paper that maximized what I was able to calculate using the state website. And that would allow us to increase very, very slightly the mill levies for general fund, park fund, library fund. There is no cap on the library debt service fund. I advertised it to be held steady because we only have 3 more years to go on that, and there's no point building up a huge excess that we will have to eliminate the last year of the tax anyway. The others, general fund goes up by 21 10,000ths of a mil. The library goes up to its maximum statutory limit by election. It goes up by 3 10,000ths.
Wait a second, I'm confused. How many zeros after the period is that?
A lot.
A lot. Expressed in percentage terms. And we're talking.
You knew I was gonna ask that. You knew.
If you go to here, then that's cents per $100 of assessed valuation. Put it in more reasonable terms. If you had a house appraised at $100,000, which means it's assessed at $20,000, that would raise 66 cents on your taxes next year.
Well, by golly, let's not leave that on the table.
I didn't want to. So it's possible that the state calculations will come in somewhat higher. I would not feel comfortable recommending a higher rate on the ordinance if we could advertise it, but if for some reason the state takes back a couple pennies, then we can always, after the public hearing next week, reduce the levy that's in the ordinance. And so next week, there will be, as advertised, a hearing at which I don't recall anybody ever attending.
Yeah.
Talk about. Sort of like the budget hearings. Nobody comes. I have.
With exciting numbers like those.
Wait,
you talked
I was
about,
gonna say, if James wants to create a crowd, all he has to do is city
I
conservative
was gonna volunteer to invite a few special people if you like.
headlines, the city considers tax increase. And see, headline that.
On dogs in high school football.
Eh,
And cats.
And cats.
Cats.
Um,
Only feral cats.
It would take somebody with a calculator to notice. The important thing is that this was not a reassessment year, so people with real estate should have the same assessments they had last time unless they've made improvements.
Or fire.
Or lost the house, or lost the property. Personal property will depend on whether you've held on to your vehicles or not held on to your vehicles. And if you replace them, your valuation will go up, and we get credit for that. So while the levy is staying almost the same, we're close enough to go. The taxes that we will receive will go up because the valuation in aggregate has gone up, reflecting new construction. 19 houses last year. And people at last starting to replace older cars with newer cars. So the cars that have gotten real low on Blue Book now come up to more modern valuations by Blue Book. Questions?
So my buying those 2 cars this year was a boost then.
Well, to a lot of people, not as much to us as to the school. This county doesn't take very much of a property tax. Cities are pretty minor, ditto library and the park. The highest levy is 4 times or more over the general fund city levy to go to the schools. School and school debt service.
What I'm hoping somebody.
The ad was in the paper.
Okay.
And just for the record, we're talking about 66 and 45 100ths cents, what the, $0.6645 per $100 is assessed valuation for general fund. 30 cents per $100 assessed valuation for the library fund. 29.75 for the park and recreation fund, and the library debt service will be 7 and 85 cents. $0.0785. You just have to make it difficult so people have a hard time tracking.
Yes.
The more abstract you make it, the more you obscure things.
Moving on to audit report progress.
As I reported, there will be an audit presentation here in this very room at the next regular board meeting, which is next Monday.
Excellent. Going on to other, architect contract for City Hall renovation.
Met with Mr. Simon, showed him what I had in mind, we discussed the scope of work and possible fees. We ended up with a letter of proposal that you should have in your packet, which is based on a schedule of standard hourly charges, and it has an estimate not to exceed. If we agree to this, we pass it. The ordinance allowing for a contract, the contract makes reference to the letter of proposal and says it will not exceed that. I have no reason to believe we'll even come close, because part of the work involves preparing visual plans and specs for certain work that I think may not need to be bid out. For instance, work on the gazebo, I think if we have plans on something that makes that ADA accessible, that we can do that in-house and not have to bid it out and use prevailing wage rate and all that, and that would save a lot of time and on our crew. So the fact that they're talking about a large, do you have, 3 pages or 2?
Two.
Two.
There should be a 3rd page. It was on the back of one of those when we got scanned.
Yeah, see at the bottom it says page 103, and the next page is reapproved.
Yeah, I apologize for that. The possible work on the gazebo is predicated at 5,500 as a mix. And I don't think it's going to take more than a couple of thousand. I will be meeting with the park board to make sure that when we have a plan on how to approach it, that they're gonna foot the bill for the materials to do it. I think that's fair. And I think that by the time we're through the amount for City Hall and rent the police station, all this other stuff, will probably be very close to what I budgeted at $1,250.
Okay, I do have one question, or comment anyway. He lists $3,000 for survey for topographic and utility information.
Yes.
I suspect that's on the high side. Most of it's not going to require much of anything. I would probably be willing to do that and not have to incur an expense on that part.
Okay, I told him that Mr. Robertson was available also, as originally there, about Trey Hansen and Henshaw, as affiliated his, but that is a solution, and I certainly would follow it. The topo for City Hall is mostly with regard to re-engineering the ramps and also setting grades for inlets to be able to redo sidewalk, because I believe that we can raise the sidewalk in enough areas by using an extension of the storm sewer with appropriate inlets to get rid of the plates on the sidewalk, tie downspouts directly into the storm sewer so they don't freeze. And so it's setting grade for the storm sewer as much as anything
Right.
else. And again, that's work that can be done out of the public works budget and be done by city crew. Probably the sidewalk can be done by city crew too.
Well, and even some of the information, some of the elevations could be done by Phil.
He has had access to all of the elevations for the last time City Hall was remodeled.
Okay.
And when the gazebo was built, he has had a chance to borrow and scan those plans.
So I can't see that there'd be a whole lot necessary, so
It'll be whatever is actually used, and there is a cap on that, but I will make every attempt to limit the need to do that.
Right.
And I will make sure that this is redone with page 2, as it sets forth the hourly charges for each of those categories and people.
right.
There is an advantage in that he will be up here somewhat frequently overseeing the remodeling to the Hubble Engineering Building. So travel costs should be minimized also.
Good.
So that will be an ordinance on
Moving on to estimate rise.
I had been talking a long time with Mr. Angel and somewhat with Mr. Borman about the likely need for more parking on Railroad Street in front of the building that Russ Green is remodeling. And I made reference to some standard specifications, and by changing parallel parking on the south side adjacent to the businesses, changing parallel parking to diagonal parking, I eke out 2 additional spaces, not terribly accommodating, and leaves some difficulties about the narrow street. A more fulfilling solution would be to put 45-degree diagonal parking on the north side, adjacent to the guardrail next to the railroad tracks. That guardrail is just slightly within the right-of-way. It's closer to this south than the one over in front of the Boone County National Bank, where I sort of believe that the guardrail is on the railroad's right-of-way, not on the city right-of-way. Not much I can do about that. So in effect, the street width that we can use is narrower effectively on the east side of Allen Street. The drawback, if you did that, you could get probably 20 diagonal spaces along that front. 2 or 3 of them would have to be limited to compact cars because the guardrail bends around a fire hydrant to protect it right at the corner of Allen Street. 2 drawbacks. One is, even in the best of places, there's no more than 20.4 feet left for 2 travel lanes if you follow the standard specs for how big the spaces should allow for. And given that a lot of the people who use parking in downtown drive these nice big pick-em-up trucks with trail hitch and everything, I mean, they're gonna be out there as far as any design standard would allow for.
Right.
The other is that we would have to get rid of about half of the parking in the city devoted to truck parking. We have enough room over there, I believe, for 4 spaces, 2 on either side of the Civil War Memorial Monument.
I ain't doing that thing again.
So we can make downtown more business friendly by having more spaces. We create a problem that will have blowback to you because there wouldn't be any truck parking allowed in the western half of what is now truck parking,
There is a third option.
which is
Get rid of half the truck parking and have parallel parking on the railroad side as well, which there's about 10 spaces that were there previous.
and then you might be able to make them just slightly smaller and still meet the standards.
Probably, because generally those people with those big trucks don't like to parallel park anyway. They'll
Don't
walk
blame
before
them.
they do that.
Don't blame 'em.
Of course, I'd be inclined to probably do nothing until we find out how much he might need there, which would depend upon who he gets in there. He doesn't have anybody in there yet.
It will be a chicken and the egg argument. If he doesn't get anybody in there, there might be an excuse that the parking's not right for him, or this, that, and the other. And I would have.
I'm not saying wait until he opens, but at least wait
See
to
what he
find
does.
out what he does.
Okay.
I'm not adverse to changing the parking up there.
I mean, you know he's gonna have apartments up above it, isn't he?
Right.
Yeah.
He is gonna have
People-
apartments above it.
People parking out,
He has the possibility of at least a few spaces in back.
And he did indicate that he did plan on having assigned or some kind of parking for the tenants in the back.
Which would
Makes sense.
make a
and they
lot
got
of
that
sense,
city
but,
parking lot right down the road.
yeah. And sometimes it's full and sometimes it's not.
There's not a lot of people parking in front of Clifford's building.
Clifford's working on his.
There's a reason why they don't park next to Clifford's building.
I would have a question that would be good to be floated in public. We have an ordinance to keep the big trucks from parking in residential neighborhoods. And parking is obviously a problem for them. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily a city issue to provide parking for somebody. But are there any suitable options that the city could provide, pursue, whether public or private.
They can park out there, simple.
If you could get that past the,
Out where? Oh, yeah.
Okay, history. This has come up many times before.
I do know that the city of Vandalia has a big, nice, in their industrial park, a big rocked area that has about 15 trucks or trailers parked just about all the time. And, I mean, we have nothing anywhere similar to that here.
We don't. Close to downtown, we don't have anything that's vacant and available right now. The board had thought that this was an issue to be dealt with by the private sector, that the city didn't have business competing with the private sector by furnishing free parking, but some enterprising citizens could do that at a cost. But of course, the over-the-road truck drivers that might park for a weekend don't want to pay that cost. And the feedback we got was also that they wanted a place that was well lit, had electric plug-ins for the reefers, and had continual police presence. And so
Well, when
basically,
you
nothing ever happened.
When you rub the genie lamp, you don't cut yourself short. You go ahead and you wish big.
Yes. Well, the crux of the matter still is this a public purpose that the city should provide it, or is this something that the private sector could and should provide? We went far enough to keep the spaces that have been traditionally on the road. We didn't change that, but we didn't ever designate any place new.
When was the last time there was parallel parking on this street in question? On the railroad side? Because the paint's still there. Would that have been 10 years ago, 15? How long's truck been designated
As
there?
long as I've been here, sir,
Okay,
at
well,
least part of it.
okay.
I won't test to,
You don't remember specifically it being put in there?
I can look it up in the code book. That is one of the parking zones that is designated by the code, and I could look up when the ordinance was passed.
Okay, I'm just kinda curious, but I wouldn't take up this meeting time to do that.
I will provide that information at the end of the day. Right now, there are 4 spaces available for car parking, so having 10 would be a pretty nice addition. The other spaces are normally used on weekend.
Okay.
Allowing parking in the neighborhoods has not worked particularly well. We got a lot of feedback to the board about damn trucks taking up the whole street in front of me and my neighbor. Most city streets, even in the newer subdivisions,
They aren't suitable.
yeah, if you have a truck parked there, you have an effect to the one-lane bridge sort of feel. You have to wait for somebody oncoming to get by before you can get by, and it effectively disallows parking on the other side of the street opposite. And it's even worse in the older part of town where you got 15, 16-foot pavement.
I don't
and
think
some gravel
anybody
shoulders.
here is gonna question the wisdom of the ordinance where we don't have truck parking in residential areas. I think we're all good with that.
So
Could be assuming too much, but
would the direction be to, we're getting the word out. In fact, I talked to a truck driver parked over there when we were measuring out those chalk spaces. And he was sort of, he thought he'd be able to talk Chance into letting him park over next to the plastics building on their lot, since it's not used as much anymore. However,
I did have the
we'll
idea,
get some feedback.
I did have the idea that there were some lots, and I don't know what you call it, but around the brush pit over by the,
Yes, those are all Chance property.
but, I mean, they are minimally used now, and I don't know.
I don't know whether Chance would want to just do it informally or ask for.
Didn't know whether, anyway, the city would want to accommodate that at all, or.
I don't know, we would have to buy property to be able to accomplish this. There is no vacant city property suitable for truck parking.
Two trucks get parked in 105. Back in there.
Sorry,
Hard to
but
make
as
that.
of last Friday, that isn't our property.
Well, I know it's sold, but they could have backed two of them side by side.
See, that could be used that Harlem can now advertise and rent
Truck parking.
truck park.
Well, all righty then.
Well, they could do that to make some money for their renovations.
Yeah.
Is this something you would like to take quick action on, or delay it a little bit to see?
I think, I don't have a problem with Mr. Borman's suggestion that we wait a while, but I think that it ought to be maybe,
I don't think
In
we
the
ought to
queue.
wait till he opens,
No, I agree.
because then people, you know.
But we need to see what
When you
he's
get
gonna
somebody in
do.
there that says, well, there ain't no parking, I don't want this.
If there's, I mean, if he gets somebody and has somebody that's interested that it's gonna be a high traffic generator,
Yeah.
then obviously it becomes more important than.
The fact that you've talked about it and are entertaining the idea, he can, if somebody says, I need it, he can say, the board will certainly entertain that.
and if he would come up with a specific suggestion,
Yeah.
that would be helpful. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm just,
I'm just not inclined to make a problem out of something that at the moment is not a problem.
Yeah.
But even then, even if we do this, the best we're gonna do is get about 6 spaces back.
Yeah.
unless you go with the angle parking on the, on that,
Move that car
If we
down.
go with angle parking on the south side,
on the north side,
you would pick up 2, and on the north side, you would pick up,
So we have to-
you'd have 20 spaces.
you'd have quite a few spaces, but you would have a narrow,
10-foot lanes.
a narrow lane for the traffic that that street takes.
It would be tight if a pickup truck and a semi-truck were both meeting on that.
Okay.
Doesn't have time, it would be tight. Okay, is that enough to?
To satisfy me and leave you alone for a while?
No, no,
Yes,
no,
that
no,
would be
no, no.
fine.
It's customer service, will this be an appropriate answer from Mr. Green?
I will probably direct him to watching the discussion.
I'm not sure Heather will be back tomorrow, maybe a few days before this.
That's fine.
I have one more as may arise,
All
because Mr. Dawes wasn't here to bring it up. I had asked Mike to be here, I should, sorry you had to wait around so long, sir.
That's all right. We don't have to talk about it.
We should,
Okay.
since you're here. The question of the website that says that we have had violations of our permit standards for sewer treatment. And our research shows that we've gotten some notices of warning that we might have potential problems. We've corrected those and/or provided information that said their records were wrong, but we have not received any violations. And Mike has an explanation, we believe, after a lot of research, on what that particular EPA website is referring to. So,
I contacted Scott Adams with the Department of Natural Resources in Macon. He's the one that did our last 2 inspections. And he put me with Mike Abbott, who's with the Water Protection Plan, the data management. And he, if you've got that printout, I think Phil's put in there, it talks about the violations that are listed, and they just, the two websites, the software just doesn't work between the two, DNR and EPA. So EPA automatically lists them as violations. And if you notice the ones in the red box, you can see that a couple of them are non-reported instances. Well, if they can't get the information, it's gonna be non-reported. As far as the manual, they couldn't tell me what those two meant. We did have the two, actually, there was like 4 issues there in April, May, June, 2010. We had really heavy rain that year, and to the fact that we discharged 99 million gallons out of the Northeast Lagoon. And it stopped on June 25th, and we have not discharged since. Part of the problem was, at that time, we were still monitoring for metals, back from when Chance Company's pre-treatment and all that was in place. So we were doing tests daily anytime we discharged. They were having to be tested. And they were a lot higher limits than what we have now. Plus, that was about the time that we found out that our overland flow was only allowed for a third of the amount of flow that it could actually handle. So because we couldn't put more water out, that meant more water being stored. And at that point, we had left the farmers about half full in their ponds, and we were half full at the end of the growing season and harvest. That put us all winter with full ponds, time the snows, rains, and everything came through. So, all that has been corrected. Both people definitely assured me that we are 100% clean on any violations. There's nothing outstanding there. With the exception of a letter of warning, which is normal procedure like we have. There was one on a wet test, which was pH. We just had to do a retake, send it in, and it cleared. So, and pH is time sensitive as far as how long you can have it stored before you get it down, have it tested. And that could have been all it was. So, just the normal everyday things that are gonna pop up were some of the few things that were noted by EPA that are really no problem. Is there any other questions on that?
The critical thing is, we have not discharged anything since June 2010, and therefore we can't possibly be in violation because there are no standards that apply.
And we are working real hard not to discharge because we're right now waiting on a permit to be reviewed so we can get this new permit in place. And a lot of it's dependent on our discharge. If we will have one, it would probably set us back on what we're trying to do.
Short answer is, it's accurate to say that what we received in the way of warnings, EPA marked down as violations when they really were
They
not.
just were not trans.
And the way I understand their reporting errors are,
You can't correct them.
what's that?
You can't correct them.
The way I understand it, EPA has not been willing to update and correct the site. And so they are leaving
The violations.
violations that are
actually there.
truly not violations. They're reported in error,
Yeah.
and they refuse to correct it. Is that the way you understand it from the
That's-
very DNR?
Exactly what Mike Abbott said.
Okay. And so that's getting, from the email I read, a lot of water systems are complaining, probably taking criticism of their system because of these misreportings. Is that the way you understood it?
Right, and on that one paper, it actually lists an FRS number. They couldn't tell me what that was. That was an EPA designated number, and what we're thinking that was a creek sample. They take those to check for any chemicals that might be getting in there, just anything to see what's happening. And that could have been simply what it was, because it was listed as Highway 22 Centralia. So it could have been a sample that they took below your dad's place out there.
Oh, draw me into this.
I'm trying. I'm trying. No, it could have been what they checked there, and it didn't show anything, but it was the sample that was drawn. So they had to put it with the nearest system, which would be us. So,
And actually, Highway 22 would be upstream from where you would possibly discharge anyway.
Right, right. And we have on occasions went back as far as like no chance to take samples below your dad's there, and then north of town, all the way out to Route T, just to make sure that we're good, because that all feeds out to Youngs Creek that way. So,
Okay, so the short answer would be, we have thoroughly looked into the question that was brought up at the last meeting, and we can find no grounds of concern.
right, right. Everyone has assured me that we're 100% clean.
The proof of the pudding is that DNR constantly is referring other systems to us as a model to follow on how to deal with regulations coming down the pike. I get calls all the time from people about what we're doing, how, whether they can visit the plant. I probably made 6 or 7 copies of the contract with the farmers for them to use as an example.
And actually, DNR said all of the DMRs, the monitoring reports, are from us. So he said, if you're gonna have a problem, it's gonna be in something you wrote down. And he said, I don't think you've had anything that you put down that wasn't right, that we haven't found or checked. So he said, I don't think you're trying to get yourself in problems. So it's just between the two, the communication there.
Well, thanks for all your investigation.
No problem.
Anything else on resume rise?
Yeah. I've had some complaints about the sidewalk over the new one by the tracks, the weeds going into the sidewalk.
On the cracks or on the side?
Along the sidewalk, it's hanging over the sidewalk.
We do part of it, the park department does part of it, the railroad does part of it.
And then it's over the fence. I went by tonight, looked at it. The weeds are taller than the fence
Right at the fence or on the railroad side of it?
on the railroad side of it.
Okay.
Senator,
My usual contact no longer works with that aspect of the Columbia Electric Department. I'll have to find out who should be doing
yeah,
that. The last time they mowed was probably for Anchor Festival, so they didn't have to mow it too many times last year. They probably got rid of it.
you need to send them a copy of our weed ordinance.
Yeah, try to do that against the city of Columbia. They're admittedly only gonna mow it probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Well, when they mow it the first time, can they round up it so it doesn't grow
I
back?
think that's what the park people have been trying to do to keep it from growing up in the fence.
Because it's all grown over the fence and in the fence and.
Is that your brother-in-law complaining?
No.
Any other resume rise?